Well, hello there. I'm Sandy Allnock, and today I'm going to be talking about skin and hair color using my Prismacolor pencils, and just a little bit on Living Coral because it's Living Coral Week on the Ellen Hutson blog, and this is apparently Living Color. Pantone picks a color every year that's the color of the year. You might see a lot of clothing in this, or housewares and that sort of thing. But notice that each one of these pictures has a variety of shades of this color. So sometimes you have a darker shade and lighter shade, and it really depends on what you're coloring. And when you're trying to make an object 3D, you might need like that rich chocolate brown color to make a shadow on it, even though you're coloring this kind of salmony pinkish kind of color. Well, this is the project that I'm coloring today. I'm going to show you most of the coloring, but not all of it, because we'd be here all day long on YouTube. I've got Little Lady, the leading gentleman, and the woman in this is from the Crafty Leading Lady. And I pulled out my Prismacolor hex chart, and I just kind of grabbed a couple of different colors from the skin tone section and from the hair section. There's not really a science behind the way you do skin tones. Just look at the person that you're trying to mimic, I guess. Sometimes you can mimic the person you're sending it to. Sometimes it's the person you're sending it from. What I'm going to do throughout this, though, is use some Gamsol for blending. And I've put my Gamsol in a little jar. And in my little jar is a cotton ball. And that means if I dump this thing over, don't ask me how I know. If I dump it over, it's not going to make a mess on my desk because all that moisture is caught into the cotton ball itself. And if I do the blending in between and then add more layers of pencil and then more blending and more pencil and more blending, that's going to give me richer color. You can do all the pencil work first and then go in and do all of the blending. That's certainly another way to go about it, but you'll get richer color quicker, I think, if you take this approach and just go back and forth. And I'm using just a couple different browns to create some shadows on him. I'm even kind of giving him some dimples. So you can add things to these stamps to make them look like the people that you're coloring. But some people have more pinkish skin, some have more yellowish or purplish. If you're talking about like direct ethnicities, then you've got a whole different set of things with darker skin tones and maybe some purples and blues in shadows. There's a lot of different ways to go, but I'm just going to go with a family here with a dad who needs a shave. So he's going to be your modern dad who's got a little facial hair going on. And again, you can make this look like your spouse or the spouse of the family that you're sending the card to. There's a whole lot of ways that you can go when you choose what you're going to color. And so I've left a little bit of his skin tone showing through on his lips. So look at someone with a beard and figure out where the hair actually is on that person if you're trying to mimic them. I'm using a couple colors of brown in the hair and putting the darker brown at the bottom and the lighter brown at the top. That's going to give me some dimension. And then I realized I wanted to put a little more dark color on his facial hair and just really give him a little more contrast. For the woman in this, I'm going to give her a little bit lighter skin, so I chose a little lighter base tone. But notice that I had some brown left over on my blending stump from my blending of the man and his hair. So start when you do this, you can start by scribbling off on a scrap of paper to get rid of it. Or since I knew I was going to add some shadows anyway, I just put that little bit of brown bloop over in the corner because that's where my shadow was going to be. I was going to put all my shadows on the left-hand side. But these are easily cleaned off. There's a sanding tool that you can use to sand your little blending stumps if you want to sharpen them up. And there's a whole little kit for that. I will link all of this, of course, in the supply list on YouTube and over on the blog, so you can grab that if you need it. But I'm giving her some other pink tones too, just layering in some pinks because she's going to have a little warmer skin that way. Whereas her husband's going to have something a little different. And you can keep layering colors on until it looks like what you want it to look like. I wanted her to look like maybe she had some Hispanic blood in her, so little darker skin tones. And then a little bit of a pinkish color toward her cheeks, just to give her a little ruddiness. Now, little kids, when you color little children, they tend to generally just be pinker and yellower and it's just lighter colors. I'm going to add a little bit of dark tones to give some shadows to her, but kids in general are going to be lighter skinned and I guess kind of more baby tones than adults. Even as they're growing until they start turning into young adults, they tend to still have those little kind of babyish colors. I wanted to make her blonde, and I want to show you some of the joy that you get from contrast in her blonde hair. So I'm starting by putting what most people would consider a normal amount of shading in her hair, using the same browns that I used on her husband. So I'm using that lightish brown color. I'll do my blending and soften out all those edges and stuff. But if I really want to add some drama to it and really make her pop, then I can add some really dark shadows. And this scares some people, so I'm going to tell you now, if you're scared, then just don't do this part. But I'm adding some really dark shadows that are underneath her head and back behind her neck, because that's going to push those back and pull her neck forward. So it makes her look a little bit more dimensional to do that. And it's one of those things that you'll get used to as you start to color with more contrast, which I always recommend because contrast is what makes us see the difference between one shape and another. And I can go back in and do some blending with my blending stump. And you can also use less of the brown, the dark brown that I did here if it scares you too much and you want to try just a little bit. Work your way up to it. That's how I did. I used to not use as much contrast, and the more I use, the more I get excited by it because it gives me a little more of that impression of reality. Now the little girl has the same yellow for her hair, but I added a little bit of an orangey color to it. And I'm adding a little bit of brown shadows to it as well. So she's going to have slightly different color, but I'm using basically the same colors with just a little tiny bit of an orange added to it to give her a little difference. This is the color that I would guess is probably pretty close to Living Coral. And it's 921 in the Prismacolor range. And if you're using a different brand, you'll have to figure out what that is for you. For him, I wanted him to have a checkered shirt, but in order to give him some shading on his checkered shirt, I don't want to mess up all the checkered work that I do. So I'm doing the shading first. And that's another way to go about doing a shirt like this if you have a pattern on it. Because if I were to mush over top of the pattern, I risk making the pattern go all kind of mushy and soft, and I wanted to make sure I keep that really strong. So I'm putting some really nice shadows with a gray underneath, and then I'm going to put the checkered marks on there. Now, if you're trying to figure out how to realistically draw a checkered pattern on a shirt, you might want to pull up either a picture of it or make your child or your husband stand in front of you with the shirt you want to replicate and say, hey, stand there until I figure out what I'm doing. And you'll figure out the direction of the lines. Look for where the vertical lines go first and kind of focus your eye on that. And that's what I'm kind of doing here is on the torso, they're pretty much vertical, but they kind of snug up toward the top and get closer together. But they follow along the arms as well. The horizontal is a little harder because if you want to make it look like it's realistically going around the body, you'll need to actually kind of follow around the shapes of each one of the arms and then the torso and that sort of thing. And if you get it kind of rounded in some areas around those sleeves and then rounded around the body or even flat across the body and then rounded around the other arm, you're going to end up tricking someone's eye into thinking, oh yeah, look, she made that checkered pattern go all the way across the whole thing. The other way you could do this is to use some of the patterned stamps and do some paper piecing and give him a really great checkerboard shirt that way if you don't feel like coloring it yourself by hand the way I did. I wanted some stronger shadows because my shadows didn't come out really super strong here. So I added some of that really dark brown on top. And this is where it's going to be dangerous. So I'm going to be real careful in where I go over it with the blending stump. And I'm going to add a little bit of shadow onto her sweater as well. I finished off the card by drawing in my own little vest on the little girl and giving her an outfit and then finishing off their pants and everything and added just some more fun to the card. But I really loved how it came out in the long run because it's a real simple card, but it's got lots of detail in it. And if I send it to somebody it looks like, they're going to be so excited to get this. So I hope you will try some skin tones in some Prismacolor pencil or whatever medium you use, and try some of that living coral as well. I'll see you guys later. Bye.